guys, I'm Stephanie Chic and I'm here today to talk to you guys about travel. More specifically, what travel means, what it means that you love to travel and how you can put this into actual skills and traits for your life, and how you can translate your love of travel into a skill set for your life path and your life pursuits. Being someone who loves to travel has a lot of strengths and a lot of good qualities to it that you can translate into skills for your career, skills for your life, personal and professional as well, even into your spiritual life. So here we go. Today we're going to talk about basically 10 or 12 things that define somebody who loves to travel and what that means, and how you guys can identify yourselves in these qualities and how you can make the most out of your life as a result of being more aware of these qualities about yourself. So a little bit about me. I'm somebody who loves to travel. I was born in France and I moved to Montreal in Canada when I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. My parents got divorced, so we had to move back basically. But that being said, I'm not sure if it's the jump across the ocean, that travel, having been born in France, that really instilled a love of travel in me. It could be part of it. It could also be other things like my upbringing. My parents were extremely cultural, very cultured. My mom remarried, and in my family, when everybody was going to Florida, for instance, my parents were brainstorming trips to Alaska and the like. We never did the average trip. We always did something a little bit out there, a little bit extra, a lot of culture, and just like rich travel experiences. We would always explore the food scene, museums, a little bit of shopping, just taking really in the culture for all it's worth. My step grandparents were the real deal when it comes to traveling. They well into like their late life traveled. Remember, we're at the turn of 2000, the millennium. On New Year's Eve, they were basically backpacking and camping through Timbuktu. So this wasn't really, and that is actually a place on earth. They were photographers, very creative souls, and really actually, even though they're my step family, I really identified with their pursuit of travel and the way that they really immersed themselves in the culture. As far back as I knew my step-grandfather, Gerald, he was never dressed in normal clothes. He was always in robes with tons of jewels and just these semi-precious stones just draped in them. This really, really beautiful, culturally rich kind of human, you know, that had all of his wrinkles and his tan and just kind of owned these turbans and these caftans and these robes and these slippers, and, you know, really traveled later in life and used, his love of travel and his income to travel as a local, but with rich experiences for sure. Whereas I'm sure in his youth, he probably had tons of stories that I unfortunately never really got to hear the bulk of traveling, I guess, rags to riches kind of deal. But his passion for creativity, photography, experiencing cultures. In one of his offices in his home, he had a wall of portraits, and on one side it was all male portraits and on the other side it was all female portraits, and these were portraits of men and women that they had photographed in impoverished areas, him and his wife, and I guess people that spoke to them in their travels. So they would travel and take a lot of pictures, and I was really inspired and I really connected with them. So that could be part of it as well. I also surrounded myself with friends, I guess, who loved to travel, that really inspired me in my youth. Towards my later 20s, I traveled a lot alone. When I was 18 years old, I went on my first trip with one of my really good friends, Laura. We traveled to Europe. We had met some exchange students in Cégep, which is a in-between high school and university education system based in Quebec. It's very unique to Quebec. And there was an exchange program, and we had met some students out of Germany. So Laura and I took the opportunity it was our first unchaperoned trip. And we went from Canada to Germany by way of Paris, actually, and that was really fun. We stayed in smaller hotels. Their Airbnbs didn't exist at the time, and I don't think our parents were ready to put us straight away in hostels. So we stayed with the families, and in between in Paris, we had stayed at some hotels. Then at the age of 21, I was a camp counselor for a company called West Coast Connection that still exists, and this basically takes teenagers on this kind of traveling camp journey excursion, and there's a bunch of trips that are worldwide. The trip that I got on was the US, and I camp counseled for teenagers traveling from San Francisco to Arizona, everything in between. It was incredible. We did everything from camping to staying in dorms, and it really inspired me and really kind of like triggered an increased love of travel. I grew up, my first email was Steph Loves Roxy, and I was obsessed with surf culture. If you knew me at that time, you knew that I lived for anything that was completely like related to surfing, even though I live in Montreal where there is absolutely no surfing, and there's no ocean, but there's snowboard culture here, which is quite the winter parallel, I would say, to surfing. So I was fully immersed in that as well. I dropped the skis and I picked up a snowboard as young as the age of 14. Actually, I wasn't very good, but I loved it, and I loved hitting the slopes and just going to on the weekends. I was in a ski school. So yeah, all of that basically tied into my love of surf culture. After doing West Coast Connection at 22 years old, I left for Australia. I went on my own. I landed in New Zealand, in Auckland, and I ended up totally detouring, as these things usually happen, and doing things completely different than I had anticipated. Was supposed to travel a little bit through New Zealand. I met somebody who told me about a hostel called Board Riders. Look it up if it's still around. It's in Manly in Australia, and I cut my trip short and I made it right over to Board Riders as quickly as I could. Manly is this beautiful suburb of Sydney, Australia. You take a ferry to get there, or that's what I did at the time at least. It was really unique and beautiful, and it was just everything I wanted to experience about surf culture and locals. It was really wonderful. I stayed in this hostel, Board Riders, where there were long-term stays happening, so I made quite the group of friends in this place. It was a really local experience. I loved it so much, met so many great people, had to say a lot of goodbyes, and there's a lot of people that I haven't even seen again in my life after having spent a significant amount of time and moments with these people. I thereafter backpacked up the coast, the East Coast, and when you did the traditional route with the bus, but when I was up in Airlie Beach, I did a Whitsunday sailing trip, and I met the team that was basically manning the boat, and they were done with their boat, and they kind of like jokingly invited me to jump into their Holden Commodore from the 80s and backpack through the the outback, actually, all the way to Ayers Rock. And I remember them saying that they didn't think I was actually going to say yes, but I was traveling alone and I had nothing to lose. So I jumped in with them. They were 3 from England, and I still talk to 2 of them. And I was the only Canadian. It was the best trip of my life. The entire trip, all the way down to Victoria in Melbourne, and Victoria in the south, and then we did Melbourne. It was incredible. I can't say enough good things. And then through there, one of my friends that I had made there, we traveled to Fiji. So I did quite a significant amount of the South Pacific at 22. Came back 4 months later, very poor, but very rich in heart and spirit. And at 27 years old, I was working a corporate job, so I kind of lost myself in the shuffle a bit through those years, which is unfortunate because I paid the price later in life, as you guys can go check out my burnout video. I will link to it here. But yeah, I lost myself a little bit. But anyways, at 27, I think felt the need to do something. All my friends at that point were settling down, getting married, all of that. And I was not in that phase of my life at all. I was working a corporate job and I needed a break. So in December, I booked a trip to Portugal to go backpack Portugal the following summer. At that time, Airbnbs didn't exist either, so I stayed in hostels. And the only thing I kind of regret, but it all kind of panned out perfectly well, was that I had booked hostels, because at 27, I couldn't really identify with the younger kids staying in the hostels and partying so much, but I did still have that travel bug and that love of experiencing local culture. And, you know, I imagine now with the Airbnb situation, it is a lot easier to be an adult and not have to stay in hostels and have the best of both worlds, like the traveling experience that I loved in my youth, but with my adult commodities, I guess. So I ended up actually staying in a hotel halfway through that trip. I did Lisbon and I did Lagos, and on the way down to Lagos, I booked a hotel, and I ended up meeting a bunch of South Africans that became my good friends during that trip. They were about my age. It was really incredible and a very fortuitous experience as well, that also had an impact on some things back home at the time after. So it was a very meaningful trip. That was the last trip I did alone. Thereafter, I'm now married, and one of my bigger trips that my husband and I did together, and we both love to travel so much and kind of in the same way. Nick's father was a pilot for a commercial airline in Canada, a big one called Air Canada. So he grew up traveling as well. We actually backpacked we didn't backpack, but we stayed our entire honeymoon in Airbnbs, except for one quick stay in a really nice hotel. And I remember even having not traveled a while and being my honeymoon, I got lost in the whole shuffle, and I was like, oh, I need to, stay in this really beautiful hotel and it be this amazing experience, this 5-star experience. And the hotel stay ended up being our least favorite stay of the entire 2 weeks in southern Italy, was where we were. We were in Puglia, which is an untapped location. If you have the chance to go, please check it out. It is not touristy at all, and it was the most incredible trip of my life that reignited in me all the reasons why I love to travel and why I identify with it and why it is such a big part of my soul. So even as an adult, there are ways to travel like a local and not like a tourist, because I do not like to travel like a tourist at all. So I was looking into some things upon my return to kind of put into words and terms what these feelings that I had when I traveled meant, and how they could translate into who I am as a person, and how I can lay down the groundwork for basically a fulfilled life back home. And in my research, I came across a few key characteristics of those of us who, like myself, if you identify with these feelings or these emotions or this love of travel, maybe you will be able to relate to some of these character traits. And my hope with this video is that I will be able to kind of pinpoint in you some characteristics that you think that you could use to better your life, and that you could use to your advantage in basically knowing yourself a little bit better through your love of travel. So if you're like me and you absolutely love to travel, there are a few things to keep in mind. There are a few things that basically speak to you right away. You love meeting new people, you love experiencing new things, you love challenging yourself, you love putting yourself out of your comfort zone. You love the unknown. You don't identify so much with the mundane. So all of those little things basically that can just you can list off, tie into bigger things that, bigger elements and bigger personality traits that I believe you can use to your advantage in your day-to-day life. So if you love to travel, and if you love to travel like a local and you love to see the world, there are certain elements and certain significance in this kind of passion that are really a reflection of core values and core personality traits. So the first character trait of people who love to travel is that we are empathetic. Empathy is something that you learn when you travel like a local. When you travel like a local, you don't know what to expect, and you don't know who you're gonna meet. And when you're immersing yourselves in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, you are out of your comfort zone, number one, which makes you a little more vulnerable and a little more sensitive. And second of all, it gives you kind of this bird's eye view of that given culture's riches and trials and tribulations, which in turn makes you have a lot more compassion and a lot more empathy for people who, in most cases, for sure you're going to be sensitive to what they have what they have and what they have not. You're going to be sensitive to the things that they might be rich for, but you will also be sensitive to the things that they are for lack for. And this will make you a more empathetic person, somebody who has compassion for people who are impoverished, for people who struggle. It will make you more empathetic for those who suffer around you, and you will take this with you back home. And these experiences and witnessing these struggles and witnessing people who have less will make you have more empathy in your day-to-day life for those around you who don't have as much as you might have. You might come home and see the world completely differently. You might feel like it's glass half full versus glass half empty. You will be able to understand and relate to people who have less a little bit more. And this in turn will mean that you will be more accepting of people's differences and that the world isn't equal. And I believe that this makes you a richer person because you will have an imprint of different people's trials and tribulations in you. And this will make you a stronger, more accepting, more liberal, more open, more loving person in your day-to-day life. The second thing is obviously that we are adventurers. When you love to travel, you're an adventurer, and you can translate this into a positive in your career search, in your job applications. You're an adventurer because you love to experience something new. And when you love to experience something new and when you look for challenge, that means that you're an adventurer. It doesn't mean that you're an adventurer like when I was in Australia, everyone was going, the trend was for everybody to go skydiving. I definitely did not go skydiving because I, generally speaking, have no desire to jump out of a plane and I have a fear of flying. But I mean, if you want to, leverage that or kind of like parallel that, I had a fear of flying, but I still got on a plane and flew 36 hours plus a bunch of layovers all the way to New Zealand and then Australia and back home. So you're an adventurer because adventure is rewarding, and you know that the risk the benefit, way outweighs the risk. So even though I had a fear of flying, I was ready to go through that, so to speak, adventure and get to the other side, which I knew was just going to be this amazing experience. No matter where I'm going, that's always the risk. I flew to Costa Rica and we took a small prop plane. That was a family trip and we didn't want to drive on the smaller roads. The prop plane literally scared the heck out of me. I basically had nothing short of a meltdown on the plane because there was so much turbulence, and you're in Costa Rica. They don't have the same security laws as we do in Canada, so I was very nervous. But again, thankfully we landed safely and everything was fine, and I was able to really enjoy my trip in Costa Rica. And there again, another example of my family trip when everybody travels the east coast of Costa Rica. My family was more interested in traveling the lesser developed, and this was also 7 years ago, so even lesser developed then, east coast side of Costa Rica. It's a little more rough and tumble, a lot less touristy, and a very, very culturally rich experience. And for me, there was nothing more amazing than walking through the small beach towns and just through the little streets that were kind of just hit and miss, trying out these little restaurants and seeing the vendors, and just that is definitely, Costa Rica, if you haven't been, is a destination that is extremely wonderful to experience. And if you are someone who loves to travel, you are someone who is going to welcome change, and you are someone who is eager to learn. Traveling means change. It is synonymous with change. Like that, the only constant in traveling is change. So if you are somebody who loves to travel, you are somebody who in all likelihood is very, very comfortable with the element of change. This is a huge skill in your day-to-day life back home, and especially I find when you're job hunting. I am somebody that is very comfortable with change. I've been living a life of change as far back as my youth, to be honest. So maybe that also has an effect on why I'm so comfortable with change. Change is not something that scares me or intimidates me whatsoever, and I welcome it open-heartedly. If you are somebody who loves to travel, you are somebody who has the strong, very great personal attribute of accepting and being welcoming to change. You are also somebody who is very curious. You want to experience new things. Curiosity is a sign of intelligence. It is not because you are curious that you don't know something. It is the actual opposite. It is because curious people always strive to know more and be better. So think of it as a positive in your life. It is definitely not a negative to be a curious person, and it is a definite positive attribute to be somebody who accepts change with open arms. And if you love to travel, you are seeking change in your life, and you are somebody that thrives off of the unknown. If you are someone who loves to travel, you are also someone who has a higher self-awareness. When you travel and when you put yourself in challenging situations, you learn a lot about yourself. Through this, you also learn a lot about different cultures and people. And it is through being open towards other people and other cultures that you also learn about yourself. So having a heightened sense of self-awareness develops your personal character development. Being self-aware and knowing who you are is something that a lot of people will, I don't know what the stats are, but could spend their entire life seeking to know. People spend their entire life soul searching. If you are somebody who is traveling a lot and who thrives on meeting new people, you will learn a lot about yourself, not only through the experiences and the challenges that you face when you travel, but also through the people that you meet. You will be able to compare yourself and kind of get a reflection of yourself through other people's stories and through other people's ways of living and through other people's existence, and just immersing yourself in different cultures. You will have a different, more enriching knowledge of who you are. Traveling develops self-esteem. If you travel, you will likely again face certain uncertainty. You will certainly face uncertainty. Through this uncertainty, you will be challenged to your core. And through these experiences, through meeting different people, through not knowing, through having to do something as simple as going to figure out where your next meal is. And you know, think about the last time you went to a restaurant for dinner, like not just to get takeout at lunch break, for dinner alone in your own city. These little things have a huge impact long-term on your self-esteem. Putting yourself out of your comfort zone is a huge way to develop your self-esteem and to strengthen your self-esteem. We'll see a lot of personal growth, and personal growth is equal to increased self-esteem. How many of you have traveled and been excited to go home? Whereas when you left, you kind of were like just done with being home and you needed a change. Of course, there's some, bittersweet feelings to going home, but I rarely meet somebody who on their way home doesn't want to be going home. And this ties into the fact that traveling increases your sense of appreciation and gratitude. When you experience different cultures, when you see how other people live, you basically learn and see firsthand what you have versus what other people don't have, or vice versa. Witnessing this firsthand, experiencing this firsthand, will increase your sense of gratitude and make you much more appreciative for the life that you live at home and for everything that you have at home. I am an extremely grateful person. I am somebody who doesn't go a day without being grateful for a number of things. Sometimes I journal these, sometimes I don't, but there is not a day that goes by where I don't think I'm so grateful for this, or thank God I have this. And I fundamentally believe that my innate gratitude and my innate appreciative nature of things is because of who I am, because I love to travel, and also a little bit tied into my childhood and how my childhood was a little bit difficult. It makes me have perspective on things. But if you travel and if you experience different things and you see the way other people live, it is the first way to get perspective. And I believe that when you get perspective, you experience gratitude and you experience appreciativeness. And last but not least, if you love to travel, you are probably someone who is positive. You are probably someone who sees the glass half full 9 times out of 10. And you are probably someone who has enough experience and insight to know that somewhere out there, there is someone who has less than you and there is someone who is struggling. To that point, another skill that you have is that you are somebody who is highly adaptable. This is a crucial skill when it comes to your day-to-day life back at home. Being able to adapt is being welcome to change. It is a skill set in today's world where things are changing at a faster, more evolved pace than ever before. This is definitely something you should be putting on your resume if you are somebody who is well-traveled and who is well-traveled, then you are definitely somebody who is very comfortable with adapting to change and adapting to different scenarios at a quicker than average pace. This is a skill and something that you should commend yourself for. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was my debriefing on how to translate the skills that you develop while you travel into your day-to-day life. Maybe a way for you to look at some of the personality traits or some of the character traits that you develop through your travels and that you can use in your day-to-day life to better your career and better your personal life. I hope these tips were insightful and helped you realize some of the strengths that you were maybe overlooking. If you have any questions, you can DM me on Instagram at Stephanie Chic, or you can comment in the box below. Please check out my channel. I'll link it right here for all of some extra videos that I post regularly, and I will see you guys in my next one. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.